Okay, I think I'm going to skip over this a little quickly because, boy, time goes fast when you're talking about your favorite subject. But it's important to realize that a lot of the sort of struggles that we're dealing with today are struggles that actually were happening 15 years ago. So some things don't change, and intellectual property, especially copyright things, don't change at all. Some of the recommendations that the Clinton administration made back in 1995 were that Internet service providers should actually be strictly liable for every copyright infringement that has taken place. And they had this idea because temporary copies of infringing content will be made as the user of the ISP is making uses of them. And so it's those copies that make the ISP directly liable for copyright infringement. And the ISPs and the telcos and the internet companies basically came to Congress and said, don't shut down innovation here. This would be a really bad idea. You extend protection so far, and essentially everybody shuts down. Okay? So the good news is that in 1998, this Digital Millennium Copyright Act, although it did adopt some rules that were, in my humble opinion, somewhat hostile to innovation in certain spaces, nevertheless adopted some compromise rules that, in fact, enabled innovation to occur. It puts some responsibility on ISPs so that if they get notice that there's infringing content on their system, they have an obligation to take it down, or they're going to be held liable for copyright infringement. But they basically can otherwise essentially deploy and use their service in a way that they think is optimal for them and their customers, and they don't basically have to have the content industry tell them what to do. Since then, since the 1990s, of course, there's been the most amazing burst of internet-related innovations in all sectors. But you got to say that there have been some troublesome developments too, and the one that has Hollywood the most upset right now is peer-to-peer file sharing and other kinds of things. Now, the content industry, especially the entertainment industry, has had a series of strategies to try to counteract this. They first brought lawsuits against makers of peer-to-peer file sharing technologies or providers of peer-to-peer services. They then brought lawsuits against individual file sharers. That didn't work very well either. They've made a number of legislative proposals to try to address peer-to-peer file sharing. And internationally, there have been some treaties negotiated and approaches adopted that they are going to try to bring back to the United States for adoption here, too. In the interest of time, I'm just going to say that I'm going to go back just a little bit. So part of what was interesting in the MGM versus Grokster case, which was before the Supreme Court about 4 years ago, was that what the entertainment industry did there is it tried out a whole bunch of theories. And one of the theories was that if you build a peer-to-peer technology, then you have to build in things that will stop people from making illegal uses. Now, it's easy for them to say that, but it's actually hard to do. And it's hard also for courts to try to second guess what a technology, how a technology should be designed. And they wanted to say, well, if you intentionally design the technology to enable infringement, that's bad. But then how do you know? And is it just because it's used that way? Or what? So I think there's got to be a balance here. The existing rules, I think, are pretty good in that. There's risk to future innovation in technology and services if the secondary liability rules of copyright go too far, regulating ISPs, telcos, and technology companies. And I'm going to play one more thing before I let Barbara make her pitch, and that is that one of the most pernicious things about U.S. copyright law today is a provision about statutory damages. So it was designed actually with sort of a good idea underneath it, but then it's gotten out of hand. Right now, a company that makes uses of lots of works, even if those uses are in fact ones that cause no damage to the copyright owner, they can be liable for up to $150,000 per infringed work. And if you think about what ISPs do, right, and what a lot of technology providers and service providers do, they deal with lots and lots of different works. And so by one estimate, Google was at risk of $3.6 trillion of damages for scanning the books for the book search project. And while I've been objecting to the settlement, I think that the idea that they should be liable for $3.6 trillion of damages simply because they scanned some books that didn't cause anybody any harm, I think that sucks. And I think it's also because of the risk of that much liability, any technology developer, any innovative service provider either has to have a very big checkbook, a lot of cojones, or be totally deluded. There is a treaty now said to be about anti-counterfeiting, but not really. It's been kept secret. There are the part of that law, that treaty that's the most worrisome to me is trying to internationalize this concept of statutory damages. Most everybody else in the world, if you infringe copyright, you have to pay for the infringement, but you don't kind of like get stuck with $150,000 per infringed work. Anyway, so amazing innovation in the last decade. We all hope that that will be true in the next decade. I think had the Clinton administration's restrictive policies about ISP and technology developer liability been put in place, we would not have seen that decade and a half of innovation that we've seen. There's major pressure on today to adopt stricter rules in relation to internet technology developers. And I think that's a bad idea, but it's going to have to be, Hollywood is really good at talking to Congress, and they're really good at talking to the administration. So if people don't want their word to be taken, then it's incumbent on the rest of us to try to marshal arguments and engage in the public policy debate. Thanks.